thicker. But the big stuff, like the big fights that happen in the ugly, gruesome fights between bands that have been together a long time, that doesn't really happen very often, and we're very lucky. I think at the end of the day, like petty arguments aside, which there are like dozens, thousands of, we live. There's a lot of love for each other, and if we didn't have that, then we'd be just doing other things, and I'd be a solo artist. But like I love being in my band because I love my band, which is you won't hear that very often probably. Our egos somehow, which there's no shortage of, like all manage to kind of have some sort of weird synergistic way of working with each other.
We're talking to Adam Levine of Fan Forum on the Beatles channel on Sirius XM. Adam, did you watch the Beatles documentary, They Get Back, Waking Up to Let Me?
I started it. It's really funny because I started it and I haven't finished it yet. I'm so kind of say knowledgeable, maybe not knowledgeable, but I know I'm so aware of that time for them that it was kind of difficult for me to watch it. I know that sounds really weird, but they were so the disharmony that was happening, and I'm gonna finish it at a certain point. I think when it was actually on, I just didn't get I have 3 kids, so I just couldn't get to finishing it. But I'm glad you're reminding me now. But it was very, I think being in a band, you have had dysfunction at times, and you have had disharmony. While you're watching that, you're like, oh shit, like you just know it so well, like what it feels like to feel that way, and so it's crazy to watch that just have that footage, and to see that footage is mind blowing. But it was also like kind of too close to home, in some ways for me, because it was tough, and I'm such a huge fan of theirs. To see what I had only heard of until those sessions was pretty intense. But I have to circle back and finish it.
You guys had your first big blast of reaching the public with Songs About Jane, which was a pretty personal, dare I say, autobiographical collection of songs. It must have been a shock when you realized that all these people, millions of people, were kind of, I'm not just calling it diary, but they were hearing your innermost thoughts. Did that cause you to back off a little bit after that and go, okay, I'm going to write now with an awareness of protecting something for myself?
That didn't really happen for a while. I think it was actually to the contrary in the beginning, because I'm like, oh, I guess sharing my raw feelings is really like that. So I kind of keep doing that. And then I think 3 albums in, it became kind of exhausting and kind of emotionally draining and almost slightly depressing, because
Who's asking the
I
question?
felt like if I was always kind of having to do that,
This
I was
guy
always
is
playing a
Adam
part,
Levine.
and this was my
really?
life, right? So I felt like maybe
The guy
I was
from
my
The Voice?
got to a point where I felt like maybe I was intentionally
Maroon
kind of
5?
self-sabotaging
Yeah,
somehow.
His own.
I could never be
Stuff
happy
about
in
it.
a great relationship or feel good about this, because then I wouldn't be able to write a great song. Kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning. Is there some sort of negative you can turn into spin into a positive?
Three-time
I kind of felt like that was becoming formulaic, but it was also connected to my real life. So it's all right, that's kind of when I brought other writers in, and I kind of started to gain other perspectives on songwriting, because I just couldn't do it alone anymore, because it felt too depressing, I think.
Oh, that's really interesting. As we said, Maroon 5, the core of Maroon 5 has been together for a long time, and it is a band, but it is a band that you are the leader of, just like Tom Petty or Neil Young with their bands. And every time when you look at a group like the Beatles and you go, gee, I wish I had 2 or 3 other guys who could write the single and do the lead vocal, and I could just kind of, go to India for a while.
You sound like you're talking about George Harrison. Yeah. It's really hard. I think that loving that band so much and loving the Beatles so much and seeing how much genius was in it, it's I think the biggest mistake you can make is feeling or thinking that that's the only way, or that's how you should be, or trying to force that. It's that those guys could never have predicted what was going to be happening with what I wound up achieving, right? And who they all wound up being. So yes, not really. I think there's merit to having there be any number of guys in the band that can write, and you know, to yes, of course it's aspirational to think of having like, you know, George, John, and Paul in a band together, the 3 or 4 guys are those guys. It's like insane.
Yeah,
That's not like a reasonable that's like fantasy.
that's not a reasonable aspiration.
No, not really. But no, I like kind of being in the role that I'm in, and I think the guys kind of like it too. I think that maybe in the beginning there were some weird growing pains as a band trying to figure all that out, but I think once we kind of like figured out, and also look, I think I got to the point with the guys where I said very, very honestly to them, like, we're doing great. You know, I enjoy leading. Like, let me lead. I think we, because you know, I'm sure you've talked to guys in bands all the time. And they say, you know, it's a democracy. It's this, which is never true, by the way. But you know, I kind of it was a democracy, and everybody was always heard. But I kind of at the end of the day was like, let me go on this thing. Let me take us to these places and trust me. And if it starts to not work, then we're going to go back to the drawing board and, you know, do things differently. But they were all very trusting in me to do it. So.
It's worked out pretty well for everybody.
Like I said, we have a rare synergy, guys.
Adam Levine and Maroon 5 will return to Dolby Live at Park MGM in Las Vegas for 16 performances from May until October. You can get tickets now at ticketmaster.com/Maroon5Vegas.
Maroon 5.
You can see the Beatles Love Show while you're out there. You know, you could do a double header.
It's a great show.
Adam Levine, you have one more duty, and we'll let you go from the Fab Four of the Beatles channel, and that is to pick a song and tell us why you picked it by the Beatles that we can play you.